Karthik and Guha, the best way to describe them is I've never met two people that have reinvented themselves multiple times through pure innovation. Right out of high school, they started Vicarious Visions, which was, they were game developers. They created Guitar Hero. That company got acquired by Activision, and then they did it again. They created Skylanders, which was, again, a multi-billion-dollar franchise. They did that for about 10 years, and then they created their next venture called Balin Ventures, which I think stands for Tip of the Spear. And they're incredibly innovative, humble, just really nice guys. I've enjoyed, every minute I had with them in school here. So I give you the Bala brothers.
So yeah, we're gonna talk a little bit about our history and talk about some of the products that we built, where what we've really had to do as game developers is kind of create this culture of creativity and discovery. And we did it for 25 years. We left the company that we started, had some time to reflect on what we're going to do next. And so it was a lot of time to think about what worked and what didn't work. And we wanted to kind of encapsulate some of that into a small presentation for you. So we are incredibly fortunate to have worked on some pretty big games over the years. Guitar Hero and Skylanders both became pop culture phenomena. And actually Guitar Hero 3 that we worked on was the first ever video game to make over $1 billion in revenue, single product. And now that's become more common as the industry has grown. And we started this company called Vicarious Visions, which is based in Albany, New York. There's over 200 game developers there, and they're part of Activision, which is one of the largest video game publishers in the world. Didn't start out that way. We actually started when we were in high school in our parents' basement in 1991, and working on our first game. And the first game was for PC CD-ROM. These are the early days of PC CD-ROM, where even doing video on a computer was early days. And this was an incredibly creative and innovative project for us. It wasn't necessarily innovative in the market sense, because we were just figuring out how to make games. There wasn't really a place to go. This was the early days, very early days of internet, so there wasn't a lot of resources or tools to make games. So we had to figure it out on our own. And it took 5 years to finish our first product and get it out into the marketplace. And although some critics liked it and others didn't, it was a commercial failure. But we got a first product out into the market. We're very proud of that. We were able to raise some seed capital after that, and then we worked on our second game that we were super proud of, and it was super innovative, which was also a big commercial failure. Now, this one was actually was ahead of its time through the technology and innovation, and it took 4 years to make this. We could never get anything done on time, but it was brilliant in some respects to a real niche audience. I mean, the manual for this game, I kid you not, was 250 pages. And we were proud of that. I don't know what we were thinking, The complexity of this game was mind-boggling. But, we actually won awards at the first ever Independent Games Festival that got us noticed. And realized, we're making stuff that we like. We don't really understand how to make products that resonate throughout the world. We've got to go figure that out and somehow stay in business, because this track record is not really working. And so we were able to find our first real customer. But those games, they weren't that great. We weren't really passionate about those games that we made. There were aspects of it that were innovative. We were passionate about building a company at that point. But the games, not so much. And you know what? The games weren't all that successful either. In the marketplace, but it paid the bills, and we kept going until that main customer of ours went out of business, and we were in a lot of trouble. So Guha, I think you were like 2 years out of college. I was 3 years out of college from undergrad. We had about 45 people on the payroll. We lost $2 million worth of contracts overnight. We ended up taking a personal bank loan of $1 million, with all liabilities and no real assets. And so it turned out that we learned a big lesson that banks don't want to give you money when you need it. But we were able to get that money, and we knew that we were in deep shit for the rest of our lives if we didn't, get out of this mess. And so what we knew was we couldn't operate this other way that we were doing, where we were just doing these sort of, work for hire contracts, whatever there was a check. It wasn't going to work. We had to get a breakout success, and that's the only way to get out of this debt as well. So the following year, we did. We produced a game called Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, and it was both technologically a marvel, creatively, but it also hit the market at the right time. It was a product that, well, when we got the contract to do it, we realized it wasn't technologically possible to pull it off, because we were working on a brand new platform. Nintendo was launching their Game Boy Advance, and we realized we had to make a 3D game, but the hardware can't do 3D. So we ended up inventing the first ever 3D game on a handheld or mobile device. And it was a crazy project, and it was a time when the company was in a lot of trouble. So the plane is going down, and there was a lot of anxiety and fear, but we can't let that affect the environment. We can't let that get to the team at all, because that's the surefire way of killing any kind of creativity and innovation. So that was sort of the leadership challenge, for us, and being able to place that bet for that breakout success, and we got it done on time. And for the launch of the platform, we even won a BAFTA, which is a British equivalent of an Oscar, and it was our first multi-million unit hit. So this time around, we kind of got it right, where it was a product that resonated globally, and it surprised consumers in terms of what it could do.
Now, time went on, and we were able to repeat some of the things that we had done, well with Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, which is sort of take on some of these challenges, give the team the creative space that it needed, and try as much as possible to take the pressure off, where we had sort of, not just us, but our leadership team really help focus the business on, okay, well, are we operating well? Are we delivering our products? And those sorts of things, really trying to optimize. But around 2005, we realized that we wanted to not only make individual hits, but start playing at a larger level. And so we sold the company to Activision, which was at that time, it wasn't as big as it is today, but it was one of the up-and-coming sort of big game developer and game publishers in North America. And we had business with them for several years, and it was a really good cultural fit. And it was our first shot at really taking a business that was generating hundreds of millions of dollars per title to billion-dollar franchises. Now, revisit a couple of these properties, Guitar Hero and Skylanders. Now, they have their commercial features associated with them, but the things that were unique about these franchises, and this sort of became apparent to us also in the invention of how we did the Tony Hawk for Game Boys. They started with sort of singular insights. In some ways there were games that were made by dozens and sometimes hundreds of people. There were millions of lines of code that go into this kind of software, huge amounts of graphical assets and all those types of things. In the case of Guitar Hero, music licensing, artist work. In the case of Skylanders, huge amount of sort of toy creative, supply chain, mechanicals, things like that. But they were informed by simple insights. In the case of Guitar Hero, it was unleash your inner rock star. And in the case of Skylanders, it was bringing your toys to life. It didn't start with a tagline, though. Really the way that these products came about. And in the case of Guitar Hero, we arrived a little later on the scene. It was invented before we started making them. Activision bought the company that invented Guitar Hero, but they didn't have a software solution when they sold the business, and we became one of the development studios that supported it. Now, the way that was discovered was really doing very simple prototypes and saying, hey, let's give some space to build this thing. Let's get our hands busy with trying to build an experience and see if there's any magic there. Is there any kind of magic that gives you kind of a transcendent perspective, some kind of entertainment experience that really is surprising and surprisingly delightful as well. And then from there, building outwards to build the ecosystem around it, build the infrastructure around it. One, for how do you engage a person, not just for a moment, but for minutes, and then hours, and then repeatedly over weeks, and then build a whole business around that. And similarly for Skylanders, it's really an iteration saying, or a lot of tinkering, and just open-minded thinking about what can be magical. Now actually one begat the other because Activision had a business with peripherals, with Guitar Hero. Other studios started thinking, well, what can we do with plastic as well? And essentially what it was the device was a way in to the experience. And so they started playing with that, and they found that for a child, the way to the imagination is through the fingers. And they started building these toys and they came to life in the video game. That was a magical moment. In fact, we called it the magic moment for Skylanders. And that insight, really, putting the child at the center, giving that kind of empowerment to the child, bring the toy to life, was what made that franchise. And so all these external attributes, you know, the scalability, the global presence for these brands, all based around those singular insights. You know, the pharma equivalent for this would be, look, you have a single molecule and an entire sort of drug platform is built around that single molecule. Now, I want to take you through some of this. It's kind of nice to hear that, you know, you have this single insight, suddenly this huge franchise evolved, you put a bunch of people around it, you built the software in sort of a thoughtful, operational manner. Things don't happen naturally, and certainly things don't happen in that way. So I'll take you through a little bit of the story of how we made one of these games, Skylanders Swap Force. The name was sort of an outcome of the innovation. So a couple years into Skylanders, we thought, hey, look, people have had a taste of bringing it to life. We have to bring a fundamentally new interaction so that children will be amazed again. And we came up with this idea, some of the concept art that was generated at the time. If you take apart and put together different pieces of a Skylander, different pieces of this toy, it would be a creative exercise now. If you're playing with your fingers and your hands, this would be really fun and a different kind of play pattern in terms of bringing toys to life. And we started building it. And this is what the early prototype started looking like. Pretty janky, engineering prototypes. We had a small team. You know, it took about 200 to 300 people to make a Skylanders game, but the core innovation team was only 2 or 3 people. And part of it was the cost of failure is so cheap that you could try a lot of different kooky ideas in terms of how to do it. They had a fixed timeline to do it, like everything else that we did to deliver a predictable commercial business. You need to follow some kind of release plan, some kind of franchise plan for it. We had a fixed timeline to do it. But we created an environment where you could actually build stuff and fail. Now, it was kind of fun to pull these things apart and configure them on the software. Of course, this is sort of no fun to play with in your hands. And it was actually connected by phono jacks. It exposed a lot of the electronics. So when you can see the magic, it's no longer magic. And it's like any magician would tell you. So that was not going to work. So we were trying to ponder this idea and how it worked and how to deliver something different. And I was down in New York the weekend we were doing it, and I saw my daughter. This is my daughter on the left. She's now 12. She's about 6 at the time. This was in the middle of when we were in the EMBA program. So I think our classmates that may have heard this story they were playing around with these strong magnets, these neodymium magnets. It was just in the gift shop, which I dread going to, and they just loved the click, the kind of the pulling these together, putting these things together, pulling them apart. And they couldn't stop playing with these things, configuring them in different ways and that kind of thing. I said, wow, okay, there's something there. So why don't we substitute these electrical connections and see what we can do? Went back to our creative director and I had him say, okay, well, how do you want to play with Skylanders and magnets? He went home and he started pulling all these toys apart. So he sawed the toys apart, put them together with strong magnets. We were looking for an interaction that's really simple, one-handed. A 6-year-old could do it, they could do it quickly and get back into the game. It would just be sort of a seamless experience. Of course, that looks pretty ugly. But what we were looking for is not only an easy way to do it, but a magical feel when it happened, a satisfying when it happened. So when we saw this, and it was just basically a quick experiment, said, okay, we're onto something. That led, so we said, okay, well, let's start making these toys. Let's design characters and see how we can put them together. we come together in an interesting way. Now, we ran into lots of problems as we did that. Fundamentally, technology behind this involved induction, electrical induction. They don't contain any batteries or anything like that. So you have to transfer memory from parts. The magic of Skylanders is that the toy remembers what happened in the game. And we do that through active and passive RFID chips. Well, magnets were going to interfere with these chips, and actually there wasn't a feasible way of doing this. And so we had to figure it out, again, going from a space where it's like, well, that's a cool idea, but none of it works, to making it work in a relatively short period of time. And so this is actually a solution that we came up with. We won't go into the technical details of the solution, but the solution that we came up with for configuring these things, again, it was a period of like, oh my goodness, what do we do? Going away, coming back, and putting it together. And this was actually used for testing with kids. So this is ready to test with kids to see if they're going to have any fun with it. Now, I'll take you through eventually what this became at this point. So we translated these prototypes into more of a complete brand experience.
This is the first trailer that announced the product.
Introducing Skylanders Swap Force with 256 swap abilities. Your new power is choice. Swappable, unstoppable. Skylanders Swap Force.
Now the sniper is filled with evil!
It turns out kids like potty jokes. Not much insight required for that. It was really interesting for me watching this over time and also actively doing it as well, that you can actually come up with something that looks really integrated and beautiful and that kind of thing, but it really boils down into really starting with something really simple and magical, and at every stage as you encounter a barrier, creating the open space for being able to solve for that, but never lose sight of what made it magical in the first place. So as we were, later on, as we were thinking, a lot of this, the story always cleans up after the fact. It's sort of terrifying when you're actually doing it. But later on we got to reflecting, what are the differences between the most creative titles that we made, the most creative games that we made, and the ones that we had, let's say, the most predictability, the ones that were the most polished, even the most well-reviewed by critics. What were the differences, both in the commercial outcomes as well as in terms of how creatively important they were as well. So some of our creative titles, we talked about them, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2, Guitar Hero, Crash Bandicoot work that we did. There was a portable version of Guitar Hero that we did, Guitar Hero on Tour, Skylanders Swap Force. Each of these were somewhat unusual. There were, fundamentally different kinds of insights. Okay, that sort of makes sense. Something that would delight customers in a very fresh way. But each of them were also delivered on time, which is a little weird. You know, it's an industry known for delays in software, in bits of software as well as entertainment and new ideas. And each of them were sort of rather crazy and chaotic in their development. And so over time, actually, what has always been revered in our industry is, okay, well, how do you take this crazy kind of unpredictable industry and then sort of tame it to make it predictable? And that, as it turns out, was never the case in any of our most successful products. The most successful products is it's always sort of one foot on a roller skate, the other one on a banana peel, and you're trying to balance it through some kind of sequential experimentation. You apply all the talent that you can in planning, but in fact, it's actually quite chaotic. At various times, it's on the verge of sort of total train wreck. And so this is an interesting thing because we have lots of external stakeholders. So you spend significant capital making one of these games, and at any point you have your global distribution infrastructure, the marketing infrastructure, all these different stakeholder groups, as well as the folks financing all of this, saying, what are you doing? What are you doing with our capital? Is this going to work? And you have to kind of keep it, at bay while the problems are being solved. Now, the most polished and predictable titles, so those were our most creative, and actually, from a commercial outcome standpoint, the ones on the previous slide were our most successful as well. The most polished and predictable ones. Now, some of these are sequels. Some of these were not the first iteration of what we made, but they're based on either technical or creative approaches that we've used in the past. Actually, the critics, the game reviewers, the folks like consumer press, like New York Times, Wall Street Journal guys, Forbes, they really like these games. On the other hand, consumers didn't love them as much. They didn't dislike them, but at the same time, they weren't surprised or delighted by these products. In our world, unlike some others, by the time things become a little bit predictable and a little bit more manageable, consumers have moved on. They're no longer surprised. They're no longer sort of enthralled with what you have to offer. So that actually was a key takeaway built over many years. I don't know why it took so long for us to realize this, but it took a little while. We were a little thick, on that point. Now, it turned out that when we had a business plan that was open-ended, and sometimes when our business was failing, which, in retrospect, it wouldn't appear that way when we plot the line over time, but the line is very noisy along the way, that's when we were most open to new ideas. So you didn't have alternatives. You didn't have the sequel you could just do. You didn't have a predictable demand and those types of things. So you had the openness to be able to try something fundamentally new without the expectation of what the specific outcome would be. But when the business plan started dictating the kind of innovation that you wanted, like get into a category because it's an open white space, or something like that, that's when we floundered. That's when we found that consumers, well, of course, you could produce something that they're already buying, but they already have enough of that stuff, and that kind of thing. So when the business plan really dictated the creative output, it became a real challenge for us. And ultimately, commercially, they were okay, but they weren't the best.
So, after 25 years, actually on the 25th anniversary of Vicarious, we told the studio that we were leaving, and which was really difficult, emotionally very difficult. Letting go, and amazing team, and it's all we've known since we were kids. So, but we knew that we had to reinvent ourselves, and this is something that we're contemplating. Our EMBA class knew about it throughout the process, and actually the Skylanders Swap Force, that 2-year development cycle happened right on top of the EMBA program. Also, we had kids, we had babies at the same time. Anyway, it was a lot happened in those 2 years, and we knew we wanted to leave, and we had to find the right time, but we left after 25 years, and we wanted to start over from scratch, and really think about what we'd learned, and figure out, well, what made us happy. So we started 2 companies. We started Villain Ventures as a means of kind of giving back to our community and helping other startups the way we were mentored in the early years, and to look at industries outside of games where game technology and game design could have a disruptive impact, and look at how we can help new businesses. And then we started Villain Studios, and our goal there was to build this world-class team to find breakthrough new experiences, like brand new ideas, and really figure out how we can have this repeatable way of finding the magic, finding the breakthrough in new things. So let's talk about creativity. As much as I hate to admit it, creativity is not a talent, and it's actually something that can be practiced. It's not something that you're born with, and some people have it and some people don't. It turns out that you can kind of operationalize it. Now, there's no guaranteed solutions. The best you can do is increase the probability of coming up with something innovative, and do that in a repeatable way. So there's some research around this, and when we dug into this further, there was a researcher named Donald McKinnon, and in the 1970s, in the 60s and 70s, there was a lot of psychology research around creativity, and he was at Berkeley, and he proposed a really interesting sort of approach, and what he proposed was that there are two states of mind when it comes to creativity, open and closed. And creativity is a way of operating. It's about getting into a particular mood, and that mood is the state of play. So let's talk about this a little bit more. So the closed mode in your mindset, and this is for most of us, this is our natural state of mind when we're at work. It's that slightly anxious state. You got a lot of stuff that you need to get done, and you're trying to complete tasks and checklists, and firefighting, and moving on from one thing to the next and stuff. That's pretty much most of our days, right? Well, it can actually be pretty satisfying and exhilarating, and for all of us Type A personalities, we kind of feed off of it. But it turns out that creativity does not happen very well in this state. What you gotta do is you gotta be in this open state where it's an almost playful state. It's relaxed and there's no tension, and it's almost childlike. My wife accuses me of being childlike all the time, so and now I have a way of excusing that. And she's a clinical psychologist, so I'm gonna put the book right back to her. And it's where you can find space and time to be curious about ideas just for its own sake. Now, this is a state where you can start working around constraints, combining ideas, and solving problems that earlier seemed intractable. And the longer you stay in that open state, which can actually become pretty uncomfortable because you start thinking about it and not really figuring it out, and you really want to make quick decisions so you can actually get out of that uncomfortable spot and move on. You're tempted to just, okay, let's just make a decision and go, kind of thing. It turns out the longer you stay and can stay in that state, the greater the chance for having that breakthrough idea. And the people who are more creative have been able to practice this and stay in that open state. Now you set time limits, you don't stay in it forever. If you think about our early games when we didn't even have a language to think about these things, we were in the open state a lot. We could never get anything done on time. So it's a matter of understanding how we can go from that open state and into the closed mode, because the closed mode is how you get stuff done. And really that purposeful and reliable creativity is not either state. It's actually the reliability, it's actually moving from the one state to the next and oscillating between them in an effective way. And you can do this on your own. You can also do it in a team, but there's a lot of challenges around that. And from a leadership standpoint, our job is to be able to create that kind of environment that fosters this way of operating.
So getting into the open state, part of it is having a spatial separation, the place that you get all of your work done all the time, you're working with a team and so forth. Not necessarily the best place to not be interrupted. In fact, getting into the open state means giving yourself enough time to be in the open state. In a lot of ways, it's sort of like saying, okay, well, we have all these things to get done, but let's take the example of, how do we solve that magnet problem? Having the guy get out of the office and actually doing it in his home workshop and doing it himself where he can get his hands dirty with it and really play with the idea of magnets. The idea wasn't, hey, look, do this specific thing with magnets and get it done. Play with the idea of, okay, well, there's something in there with the magnets. Here's what I see. Go and figure something out and see what you can find in this. Getting out of the environment, giving himself enough time, but saying, come back tomorrow with finding out what you learned. Not come out next week or whenever. Not an open-ended kind of time frame. Some place where you could say, okay, well, set it aside, just focus on a simple problem, give himself enough time to get off the mind creep, to stop the interruptions, stay in this state, and then maybe come up with an idea. Maybe you won't. And you have to be in an uncomfortable spot where you have no assurances of payoff. And stay in that uncomfortable spot until you have to make the decision. So there's always a time that you need to make a decision and commit. There's always competing resources. There's always all right, we don't have enough time to keep this problem open anymore. We have to make the best decision that we can. But use as much of that time as possible. And that's a really uncomfortable spot to be in. And creating that open environment where the problem solver can actually do that, that turns out to be a real challenge. It's a challenge for me as a leader because I have accountability and I want things done. Like I want the problem to be solved. But I have to have patience and the ability to be able to prefer the solution. Now staying in that open state really means not trying to have an open agenda in terms of what to do about it. And there's a big difference in that behind iteration and innovation. So there's an approach that we tried for innovation, which is sort of like, okay, well, let's look at a big problem, let's break it down into its pieces, run successive experiments, let's do some A/B testing, every creative choice, let's put it in front of consumers. It is a good way to iterate for better outcomes, and that kind of thing is a better way to optimize. It's hardly ever a way to get insight. It's hardly ever a way to be able to surprise somebody, to come up with a fundamental breakthrough that will create freshness. And for that, you have to have sort of a zero expectation of payoff and be in this kind of open state to do. In fact, iteration is possible by going down a checklist and following a systematic process. The innovation part, much more difficult. And so, building on that idea, it's like, well, who can do that effectively on a problem? Who can effectively be in an open state and come up with a meaningful answer? Well, the passion that an individual has around that problem has a huge deal to do with it. That drives the kind of the nonlinear curiosity, the kind of the ability to bring thoughts from adjacent spaces or their own reading or their personal work, or their ability to actually invest in the skills to build it themselves and try something. It's all centered around not handing off a solution to execute, but giving the capability, getting a person that can actually solve the problem or has the relevant skills, the space to actually be able to do it. And in fact, we've gone from ultra specialization, where the best animator works on this problem, or the best engineer works on this problem, to a person that's a sort of a generalist that can go between subject matters and build something that can show the insight and you can feel it and see it, is actually far more effective in doing it as well. And so learning to make things is just as important as that. And one of the cool things about this is that you can imagine in terms of really being in the open state, coming up with unusual insights, relies on diversity of perspective as well. We're all thinking in the same way and have a culture that homogenizes. It's a huge problem. You don't come up with new ideas that way, and that's kind of, it sort of sounds intuitive and easy, but if you're an organization that requires stringent process, getting out of that process is sometimes really important to being able to have any kind of innovation or any kind of thinking like this. So actually one of the liabilities that we have in our own industry is a gender diversity problem. If half the consumers out there are women, and actually half the consumers playing games today are women, but almost all the people making them are men. Well, think about the lack of diversity in ideas that we have in our own shop. So these are the kinds of structural problems that we have to work on to make sure that we have a continuing supply of fresh ideas. And then finally, learning to make things. Make things and valuing the making of things. Reduction of sort of insights into actual practical ideas, and ideas that you can see and feel is also really important.
So this led us to you know, our approach with Valence Studios, and so the culture is really the key to invention and reinvention. So when we said, all right, we're gonna build a new studio, we're gonna think about this differently, a handful of us kind of came together, and we didn't talk about ideas of products. We discussed the values by which we were gonna, you know, build this new kind of discovery-focused company. And if we go back to the earlier products, like the first games that we made, that's really indicative of really staying in the open state way too long and just meandering for a long time and not really understanding consumer needs. And the mid-stage products, when we got a real customer, we were just stamping out those games, trying to keep the lights on, and that was very much making products in a closed state. And it was the most successful ones where, even though it wasn't purposeful, it was organic and really a force of nature by the specific teams and the talent. It was an oscillation between open and closed. And that when we started building products on a business plan that's like, hey, we're going to go into this category and take this piece of the market share, and it just didn't really work out that way in terms of having the breakthroughs we were looking for. So our business plan with Valence Studios started out as, hey, we're going to build an awesome team. And then we're going to go let them play and find something that they're super passionate about. And we're not going to be prescriptive about it. It's about kind of creating the environment. And then they're going to go find the magic in something. Don't even know what it is. It wasn't like, hey, we're going to go into virtual reality, or we're going to go into blockchain, whatever the soup du jour is. It wasn't that at all. It was, let's go find the magic in something that we're really passionate about. And once we find the magic, then we'll figure out a business plan and the go-to-market strategy, who the right partners are, how to really make that idea successful and come to life. And the type of talent that we brought together, a lot of them were really senior talent who wanted a different way of doing things, and then and junior talent as well. And the common element, I would say, is their sense of curiosity. And that's actually the number one thing that we look for, you know, when we're recruiting. So this is our team. It's actually a little bit bigger now, but it's early days. We've got this grand experiment, and we've been playing in this oscillation of open and closed state for the last year and a half. And we actually found the magic in two things. Two very different, almost polar opposite things. And we're going for it. We're going for both of them, because the teams are passionate about it. So, can't tell you what they are. Sorry. But you know, and we'll see if we're right. We'll see if the market responds. We'll see if we get the right partners who believe in what we're doing. But we believe in it, and we think we found two things that have never been seen or done before. So that's it. I know, but we'll take a few. We'll take a few. Bill was late, so we'll. Hi, Bill. All right. Questions?
How many people in the picture came from your other studio?
Yeah.
And where
So-
is this in New York?
Yeah, so we're in Troy, New York, and in downtown Troy. We have about 35 people now. A little less than half have worked together, and some of the core engineers and some of the core talent, we've worked together for like 20 plus years, 15, 20 years. So it's really great. And one thing we didn't really touch on too much was that when you're trying to do this whole open closed thing with a team, it completely screws up if there's even one person who's in the closed state and everybody else is in the open state, right? So it's, from a leadership standpoint, it's about taking the team back and forth in sync. And so if you're gonna go play with friends that you like, you know, and who are gonna play well together. But we've been able to recruit talent, experienced talent from around the world as well, because we were in sync and we were like, hey, we're gonna be good play friends.
There's this pattern where, you know, all companies grow and they achieve massive success and then they all fail to innovate at some point, but they're still doing well. And then a lot of them, what they do is like, you know, create an innovation unit or whatever you want to call them, like a smaller startup within the bigger context, and those usually fail. I don't know of a single success of that model, and I was wondering if you thought about that and why is that the case?
I think that, you know, the notion that you can have kind of an incubation group inside and invent cool new things, I think you can actually invent cool new things. It's really hard for that group then to compete for resources at the scale of, I mean, it's a classic innovator's dilemma, which is really difficult to escape. It's really hard for that group then to compete for the best resources in the organization to grow into something that can be great. In other words, a mature product line is always going to outperform on an absolute basis, not on a percentage growth basis, but on an absolute basis versus a new concept, including for ideas that are disruptive. So it's very rare that disruptive ideas actually come on the inside.
And the disruptive ideas have uncertainty when it comes to market potential. So when you have a mature company, they're always comparing it against the mature markets. And that's really where the rub comes. And you know, we noticed that in big companies, and that's why it required us to let go of everything and be able to start over.
And you can see that from a shareholder's perspective. It doesn't make sense for shareholders of a big company to say, hey, give up my earnings so that I might have a shot at this other market. It does in a longer term academic sense, but that's never the practical trade-off that a company makes.
All right, we're running out of time. I'll take your question.
So when you were developing these games in high school, how were your parents, you know, dealing with you guys? How was this?
Not well. Not well.
Well, we're staying out of trouble, I guess, because I wouldn't have any girlfriends either.
It took a long time, but they're okay with it now.
Question about, could you describe maybe the one or two tactics on how you kept this group open for this amount of time?
Well, yeah. The interesting thing about keeping this group open for that amount of time is not doing it for the entire duration. One of the lessons that and it's sort of like you come up with an intuitive approach to this, and then you find research that backs it up, and you call it, you know, kind of structured and all about how. But
We learned about it after we
yeah, but you have gotten after we started practicing it. So I think that the key was if you stay open too long, actually, the idea becomes very complicated. And just a creative idea on top of a creative idea on top of a creative idea is just sort of a mess. It's not particularly compelling to anybody. So the idea here was to be able to go open and close on a regular basis and say, okay, what are the interesting areas? What do we want to explore? Let's keep that open for a couple weeks until we find out, is the technology available to do it? Is there, what is the easiest way to build this thing? Can we build it today, or do we shelve it until some other things become available so it doesn't dismiss the idea, it just moves on to the next one?
The key is actually to set that deadline, so you can kind of like time box it. And that doesn't mean that you don't get to go back into that open state and revisit problems and things like that. By setting that, you're like, you know what, everything else can wait. You kind of create the space and time necessary so your mind can be at ease, so that you can actually play. You know, everything else can wait. And that helps a lot. Otherwise, your brain starts thinking about all the things you got to just get done.
For the two projects you guys are working on, how much of that was led by your vision and the team got behind it and supported, or how much was it internally created throughout the team and you guys basically said, yes, that one and that one?
Well, the nice thing is, I think that we're small enough that we were just organically part of the team, and there were some notional ideas, and we had a whole bunch of different ideas, and we just started exploring and noodling, and it really transformed from where it was, you know, and the core insight still remained, and how it sort of manifested itself was quite different through this process, and how it evolved.
It's kind of an interesting question. It's like, for us, we try to participate in the team, but one of the most important things is to be curious for us, as opposed to say, here's an next cool idea. Because that's a quick way to shut down other people's openness, right? I mean, working calling the purse strings and with the authority figures and all that stuff, if we have the answer, nobody else will contribute. Right? So one of the litmus tests is actually to say, hey, even if you contributed to an idea and down the line you ask the question, hey, where did this idea come from? If people can't really figure it out where it came from. Like, in other words, it has like a lot of different parents. That's a pretty good way of measuring that.
And the key thing is to ask questions, right? So when you're trying to like clarify for the team, it's really getting crisp on questions and not answers, because I sure as hell don't have any answers, you know. And but if we can help ask sort of the right questions and narrow it down, and well, what is this and what is that? Some amazing things can come out.
All right.
All right. We'll take questions offline. Just stand up.